Welcome back to the Spooky Skeletons podcast, my friends. Today is a little bit different from all the other episodes with me and my cousin Clint. It's going to be a little shorter, a little bit more easier to digest, a little bit easier to watch, all right? But it's going to be a story. It's going to be a spooky story, and you're going to like it, all right? It's been eons. Good to see you guys back. Press the like button if you want to see another episode, and subscribe. We're going to be posting weekly. Today we have a terrifying tale of one of man's biggest fears. That is marriage. Gotcha. Pretty good. Anyways, let's get into the story. Ben, our main character, and his wife, a bitch, had been together in total for about 6 years and recently had just tied the knot, and it's been under a year since they got married. She was the love of Ben's life, but lately Ben had been feeling like there was something wrong with her, something missing that was there before. The woman that he had fallen in love with was no longer there, and something more sinister remained in its place. It was so bad, in fact, that Ben no longer felt safe in his own home and came to a point in which he'd do anything to get his life back. Now, is this a horror story or just man's regular experience with marriage and divorce? Am I right, fellow dads? Ben's wife, Lynn, was a very kind, intelligent, and thoughtful person and was always a no-nonsense type of individual in their relationship. Being childish, pranking Ben, scaring Ben, that's not something that Lynn would have normally done. She barely even made jokes, all right? She was drier than a Popeye's biscuit. Okay? Sorry. 2 months ago, on a regular morning, Ben was in the kitchen making himself some coffee before work. He took a sip of his coffee and hurried down the hall towards the front door to go to work when he saw, out of the corner of his eye, Lynn peeking at him from around a corner. He could only see her seemingly bulging eyes and dark hair hanging against the wall around the corner. The rest of her body was completely concealed, and he almost spilled his coffee. He was so surprised to see her like that. "Jesus, Lynn," he said. "You scared the shit out of me." Stranger yet, she immediately popped out of view as if she was a kid that had just been caught, and he heard her scurry off towards the living room, was completely out of sight by the time he reached the front door. It was weird, it was totally out of character, but Ben found it sort of funny in a weird way. In fact, maybe it was something that Ben could get used to, her being a bit more playful and less serious. Less of a bitch. Sorry, I keep apologizing. I'm just gonna keep apologizing. Also, do you guys think this is a true story? Comment down below. Lynn's behavior was odd, but it wasn't something to call a priest over. No need for an exorcism, all right? No need to call those two people from the Conjuring movies, whatever the fuck, Lynn and Lorraine and Daryl. Ben would forget about this almost immediately once he got to work. Although, 3 days later, another incident similar to the first would happen around 2 a.m. Ben woke up to go get a drink and drain his big old pisser. Standing at the kitchen island, filling up his cup of water, he felt a strong, unshakable feeling that he was being watched. For clarification, Ben was at his kitchen island, which had the sink, so it's like just an island in the middle of the room. He was pulled back a little bit, filling up his water at the sink. He decided to look down and to the right at the floor, and he saw his wife's face there staring at him, smiling like Cheshire Cat or the Grinch, even, you know? But no audience erupted in applause and laughter, I will be honest with you. He was scared. Ben was scared. Very, very, very scary. He wasn't irritated. He screamed, in fact. He let out a shriek. Something probably along the lines of that. He didn't think it was funny. He wasn't irritated. He was genuinely afraid in that moment. He did not expect to see his wife, Lynn, there near the ground, smiling at him like some kind of abomination. At the sound of his scream, Lynn scurried off, and all Ben could hear as she ran away from him, having screamed and just seen her there in that weird compromised position. He could hear her feet, her hands and feet slapping on the ground. You know, that's freaky as shit to me. That's scary. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. He didn't run after her or even yell for her, anything like that. He was fight or flight. He was totally frozen. He was completely confused, wondering what in the caused his wife to do something so bizarre and disturbing like that. Having satiated his thirst and pissing a little bit in his pants, he went back to the bedroom and found Lynn laying there on her side asleep, or at least pretending to be asleep. He surmised, you know, kind of strange behavior. He stood there for a while watching her breathe just to make sure she was actually in fact asleep, and she was. He stood there for a while watching her just to make sure that she was in fact asleep. He thought maybe she was just pretending because it was such a bizarre happening. I mean, I would be so terrified if something like that happened to Frankie, for God's sake. She's back there. And the following morning when he woke up, he waited for Lynn to come downstairs and then confronted her about it. He said, "What was that last night? What did you f***ing do, you crazy bitch?" She frowned and claimed that she had no idea what he was talking about, which is obviously bogus, all right? She's lying. She's lying to you, Ben. You were peeking at me again, from over there, pointing at the kitchen island where he had seen her the night before. She followed his gaze and looked to where his finger was pointing and then just bursted out laughing, which is very odd behavior. You creep me the out sometimes. You know that? He said to her while she was giggling and being weird the entire time. She set her cup down on the table and then gave him a hug around his neck and was giggling and saying, "You creep me out too, so I guess we're even." She was teasing him. It was facetious. It seemed like a joke at that point. Ben was comfortable. They said goodbye and they both left for work. But Ben could not shake the creepy image of his wife, Lynn, the person he'd known for 6 years, peeking around the kitchen island, smiling with the creepiest smile a human being could muster, and then just pretending like it didn't happen the next morning. So bizarre. And the sounds that her feet and hands made, they slapped away, creepy on the tile. He tried to just get it out of his head by telling himself that she was just trying to be silly. She's just trying to, she's opening up a little bit, kind of becoming a different person, improving a little bit as a human being and not being such a dry Popeye's bitch. It wasn't really like Ben to be afraid of anyone, especially not his wife Lynn, but it still didn't sit right with him, which I completely agree, it's weird. Over the next few days and weeks, Ben started noticing Lynn peeking at him more and more. From behind the couch, from behind living room curtains, more behind the counter, from behind the counter again. Lynn had even managed to get inside her grandmother's old trunk that sits at the foot of the bed, which I think those things are so stupid. I don't like trunks. Who the f needs a trunk? What is this, the pirate era? She had the lid of the trunk popped open just enough to where Ben could see her face grinning through the crack that she had created. It was incredibly unnerving. And after that moment, 2 weeks went by and Ben didn't notice her peeking at him anymore. It was kind of like a thing that had come and gone, and he was accepting that she was done with her weird prank, and he was relieved by it. And one night, Ben and Lynn were watching a show on Netflix. I like to imagine it was something really funny and epic, like The Do-Over by Adam Sandler. And he jokingly said that he hadn't seen her peeking and playing her little spy game with him for a while. And she looked up at him with a smile and said, "Maybe I've just gotten better at it." He didn't say anything in return. He did get goosebumps and wondered whether or not she was joking. It was creepy again. Over the next few days, Ben couldn't get this thought out of his head that she was still peeking at him, but he just didn't notice. He began to feel paranoid, and he began like checking over his shoulder and developing these weird nervous tendencies to check around corners, and he just didn't feel safe in his own home. He was unnerved, constantly checking behind doors, behind blinds, etc. He felt stupid and kind of crazy. And it was worse when Lynn was home and she wasn't in full view of him, which is, I feel like that's kind of toxic to an extent. But needless to say, after a few weeks without incident, he didn't see her peeking. He began to relax a bit, let his guard down, and kind of go back to the way things were pre-peak. Pre-cringe peak, all right? Pre-cringe arc. He stopped checking behind furniture, behind doors, etc. He just told himself that it was a bad memory and that he was maybe making it up a little bit or just over-dramatizing it in his mind. Then, just a few days ago, things got so much worse. An unquantifiable amount worse. Lynn had left to go to a friend's house while Ben was lounging around, as men do, playing games, cock and balls, flying around, flopping left, flopping right, playing League of Legends on his laptop, things like that, watching Peaky Blinders with his bros. I don't know, what do men do? Around 9 p.m. though, Ben ceased his fun and went to take a shower and was washing the soap from his hair when he felt an inalienable sensation that he was being watched yet again. Something so familiar, but terrifying. Albeit a horror trope, he was washing the soap from his hair, eyes are closed. When he opened his eyes, he almost had a heart attack. When his eyes came open, he could see Lynn's head peeked around the shower curtain with her entire body concealed behind it. Just her head in the shower, around the shower curtain with him and his eyes closed. Oh my God, it's terrifying. Her long, dark hair flowing down, her insane smile, her mouth hung open with a horrible shit-eating grin, and her eyes completely bloodshot as if she hadn't blinked for minutes. She'd just been staring at him the entire time he was showering. He screamed, his dick flopped up, he backed against the wall, and she didn't move, smile, waver, nothing. Her makeup on her face ran down as water dripped, her hair wet. It was insane. She was in the shower with him. She looked giddy and inhuman, and Ben was terrified. They stared at each other for a few moments, neither saying a word, and then slowly, Lynn pulled her head out of the shower and then just moved backwards towards the bathroom door. Then the door slammed shut, hard enough to rattle the mirror. Ben, being completely unnerved and scared, rightfully so, jumped out of the shower, locked the door, screamed. He was freaking out. He was having a terrible night. Let's be real. That's scary. I mean, I got goosebumps all over my whole body. All right, guys? I was having a good day. Now I'm not. Now I'm not having a good day, okay? The audience is not erupting into gracious applause and laughter for this. This is terrible. Ben locked himself in the bathroom for about an hour. He was trying to convince himself that it was a joke again, right? But whether or not it was a joke, it was terrible. It was crazy, and he was going to put his foot down and confront Lynn and find out exactly what was going on and why she was doing these insane things, especially something so freaky and crazy. While he was doing all his thinking in the bathroom, he would stop and listen to the bathroom door to make sure there was no one outside, which is strange because that's his wife. Eventually, he heard a muffled sound. He strained to listen with his ear against the door. He couldn't really hear anything specific, but all he could do was imagine Lynn standing on the other side of the door giggling at her little stupid joke that she tried to play on him, which is not funny at all. Not a funny joke. He felt a surge of anger at Lynn for making him feel so scared in his own house and like feeling the need to hide in his bathroom for an hour over just a simple joke. That's what she was making it out to be, a joke. All these weird peeking things. Least funny meme ever. He screamed at the door to Lynn and said that this shit was getting really annoying and waited for her to just apologize or say, oh, it's just a joke, you're being a jerk, don't worry about it. But instead of hearing anything like that, he heard a faint moan that he wondered if he had even heard at all because it was so quiet, and then complete silence. Lynn? He said. Lynn? He couldn't mask the shakiness of his voice because of his trembling gonads. He was so scared. The dude was, I'm like covered in goosebumps, by the way. This story is freaking me the fuck out. He got no response, just his own heavy breathing. All right. He pounded his fist on the door, screaming at Lynn to, ask for her to just stop it and just say something to him. But there was nothing. Complete and total silence except for the occasional drip from the shower head. Being too afraid to open the damn door to face his bitch wife, he waited another 30 minutes. The dude has been in the bathroom for the runtime of a Tarantino movie. Finally, Ben decided that he was gonna leave, but he made yet again another horror trope mistake. He decided to look under the door. He got down on his knees, bent down to look under the door, expected to see Lynn's smiling face. Fortunately, saw nothing. All right, thank God, because that's freaky as He could see down the hallway to the top of the stairs. He did not see Lynn, and he wasn't sure if that made him happy or not. Because that's, kind of leaves open some doors, really. He kept looking under the door for a few minutes, expecting yet again to see her face pop over the top of the stairs or something along those lines, but he saw nothing. He stood up, hand hovering over the doorknob, waiting, trying to build the confidence and muster the courage to open the door to go out of the bathroom into his own home. He mentally prepared himself and slowly turned the doorknob, and when he heard a sound that made him feel sick to his stomach. He heard a moan, all right? Not a sexy moan, not nothing funny, all right, either. Something terrifying, blood-curdling, and he turned his head to the bathroom closet door, which was open, and he could see Lynn smiling with the most grotesque smile he had ever seen in his entire life, peeking through the gap of the door. Her eyes were as wide as ever, as red as they'd ever been, and her mouth was hanging wide open, gaping, and he couldn't even bring himself to scream. He was so afraid. And her hands were clasped to her chest, and she was trembling with excitement, like a child. Literally, this whole thing is like a excited child just trolling their dada, their dada, okay? What a weird prank to play on your dada. Another short and raspy, weird moan bubbled up from her throat, which sent a shiver through Ben's entire body, all right? Wasn't even to his wiener either. It is like, this guy was scared. He opened the bathroom door, sprinted out into the hallway, grabbed his keys and his phone, fully expecting to hear her chasing after him, but he heard nothing except for shrill laughter. This guy is getting trolled, all right? In only his boxers with his hair still a bit damp, he drove away from the house at illegal speeds and didn't look back. Ben drove straight to his brother Chris's house, which was about 40 minutes away. Chris from TLC. He didn't check his phone or anything until he parked his car. He was driving, complete tunnel vision. When he did check his phone, once he arrived at Chris's house, he saw a bunch of calls and a flurry of missed texts from Lynn. And all of them were of Lynn wondering why Ben had left like that from the house. This bitch got a weird sense of humor, right? He threw his phone at the dash of his car out of just pure rage because he couldn't believe that she had such a nonchalant attitude at he was obviously so scared and afraid and terrified of this entire situation. Ben got out of his car, went to his brother Chris's house, and his brother and wife were extremely surprised to see him in only his boxers at that time of night, and obviously being wide-eyed and scared like that. Chris gave Ben some clothes to cover up his massive swinging dong, and then Chris asked what happened, obviously as one does, and Ben just told him that him and Lynn had gotten into a fight, and then he just didn't want to get into the details, and then he needed to stay at their house for the night. And he was trying very hard to not make it seem like he was overreacting. Leaving your wife over a prank would probably be a bit of an overreaction, to be honest, but it seems pretty scary to me. I would have not done. I wouldn't be happy at all. As the night went on, Ben was staying on the sofa at his brother Chris's house, and he was trying to sleep, but his brain simply would not let him because of the traumatic events he experienced earlier with his insane wife, his bitch wife. Every time he would close his eyes, he would just see Lynn's face staring at him from the closet. And him knowing that Lynn had been in the closet that whole hour and a half while he was waiting and pondering and looking under the door made his skin absolutely crawl. She never even left the bathroom at all. She had closed the door, slammed the door as if she had. She was tricking him in every single way. Eventually, Chris, Ben's brother, gave him a sleeping pill to help him get a little bit of rest because he seemed stressed and that he needed to, unwind a little bit. Needless to say, Ben had some pretty bad dreams. All of Lynn's smiling face. Next minute come, Ben wake up from bed, no longer on sleepy pill, and he decides that he will not return home unless Lynn promises to him that she won't do any more creepy, weird shit. Just off the wall type ratchet shit. He wanted his wife back. He preferred the serious, drier than a Popeye biscuit type woman that he had grown to love. Not this quirky and weird, insane TikTok dancing hoe with her big grotesque smile. Ben was contemplating calling Lynn to get her word that she would stop doing this type of stuff when a familiar feeling washed over his body. He got up from the couch, his eyes drifted away from the ceiling as he rose, and he saw Lynn staring at him through the window at the couch level in their living room. Chris's living room, that is. Same gaping smile, this time drool dribbling down her lips, leaving 2 streaks on the glass because her face was completely pressed up against the glass window. He had no idea how long she'd been there, but it seemed like a while because there was literally drool just floating down her eyes, bright red yet again. He feared that she had even maybe been there all night long. At this moment, he did not bother screaming. The only feeling that he really had left was no longer fear, was anger. So he rushed towards the window, slammed his palm up against the window where Lynn's face was, and said, "Lynn, are you crazy, you stupid, dumb bitch?" He said, "Just go home. No!" She didn't move, and her ghastly expression never changed. If anything, she seemed to be even more elated, and her smile grew at his upset demeanor. Obviously, all the commotion and Ben screaming woke up his brother and his brother's wife, Rebecca. They came downstairs to see what was up, and they saw Ben with his hand on the glass still, and they weren't sure what exactly he was doing because Lynn was no longer there. All they could see was 2 strips of drool still running down the window. Ben tried explaining to them that it was Lynn, and they just did not believe him. They just thought it was some kind of animal or something like that because of the 2 little drool marks. That makes sense. That's what animals do, they drool. Needless to say, Chris and Rebecca were quite concerned over Ben's strange outbursts. Chris and Ben went outside to investigate the area at the window to see if there was any footprints or anything like that. All they found was a small indent, and Chris suggested that it was maybe just an animal. It's kind of hard to believe the story. The old, my wife's crazy. She's got a big giant grin and she expects me to erupt in applause and laughter every moment when she scares me. But she's just crazy, it seems. I'm scared for my life. No, it's actually just a raccoon, buddy. They were skeptical. Who wouldn't be, realistically speaking? Chris and Rebecca even suggested that maybe the sleeping pill had something to do with Ben's random outburst that morning and him seeing something, because they can cause hallucinations and things like that. Ben called out of work that day and turned his cell phone off. He didn't want to face Lynn. He didn't want to talk to her. He didn't want to go back home. He just wanted to relax because he was starting to believe that something was irreversibly wrong with her, that she was actually losing her mind and going insane. This wasn't a funny prank. It wasn't a joke. It was serious. And at that point, no matter what promises Lynn would make, saying that everything would be fine, he just wouldn't be able to trust her anymore. He cried. He sobbed most of the morning like a big old baby. As the hours went by, he kind of gathered his senses and got back on top of his emotions and figured that he was ready to confront Lynn and see exactly what was going on, giving her one last chance to explain herself. He could at least give her that after being together for 6 years. Ben turned his phone on to see hundreds of texts that Lynn had sent. Hundreds. "Can we talk? Please call me. Can you answer? Just come home. Baby, I miss you. What, you don't like my smile or something?" And then more and more and more of the same. Texts telling him that she loved him, telling him that she wanted him home, how worried she was, but not a single one addressing any of the insane, batshit stuff that she had been doing. When reading the text, Ben even noticed that they were written differently than she would normally write texts. For example, when Ben would go to pick up a loaf of bread or something like that, Lynn would send him a novel, basically, just like, in great detail. She was a big-time texter. So Ben ended up staying with Chris and Rebecca for another night, and thankfully he did not see Lynn's face through the window the next morning or night, and he finally started to feel a bit rested and a bit better. The next morning, Rebecca asked Ben if this fight was something that could even be mended, if there was a way for them to work this out, because of how upset Ben had seemed from the whole thing. Ben said that Lynn just seems like a different person at this point. In saying that, he still wasn't ready to tell Chris and Rebecca the extent of the batshit insane things that she had done up until that point. And they probably wouldn't even believe him anyways. Rebecca said that people change, you can probably talk through your issues, and we can fix whatever's going on. Ben said living in constant fear doesn't sound appealing to himself, and Ben just was afraid, obviously. He said, I think it's beyond that now. I don't think talking would help. I just don't trust her. I don't want to live in constant fear. And then Rebecca said, Lynn loves you. She's got to be crushed by all this. And Ben said, I'm not so sure about that because of her grotesque smile. It makes sense. It seems weird. Rebecca said that it did seem like Lynn was very upset and that she had never seen her that upset, which was very much unlike Lynn she knew, shaking her head sadly as she said it. At that moment, dread started to worm its way through Ben's skin. And it took a while for those words that Rebecca just said to sink in. Ben asked her, did you see her? Did you see Lynn? And Rebecca nodded as if it wasn't pure fucking nightmare fuel. Maybe for her, at least it wasn't. Rebecca said she stopped by this morning just after Chris left for work. She said that she didn't see a car and then suggested that maybe she took an Uber or something to get to the house. Ben asked, what did she say? What did she say? Did she come inside? And he began looking around, obviously, you know, being instantly paranoid, knowing that the creature that's been haunting him, his wife, is potentially in the house that he thinks he's safe at. Rebecca just said that Lynn asked if you were awake yet, and Becca said no, obviously, because you weren't, and that Lynn said it was fine if you just kept sleeping. Ben asked, was that all? Is that all she said? Did she say anything else? And then Becca said no, she didn't say anything else, but it did look like she hadn't slept in days, and that I think you should call her, Ben being you. I'm not good at this yet. Ben did not want to go home, but he felt that he owed Lynn, having been married and making a vow. You know, I don't know how that works. Through sickness and health, is it through demonic possession, some kind of insane, weird demon arc? Are you supposed to still like people after that? Because that seems like bullshit, if you ask me. But if Lynn was sick, he wanted to help her if he possibly could. He did not want to call the police, which I think he should have called the police. All right, start with, you know, if you run into an issue, call the police first, and then try to get help later. Ben didn't want to call the police, and anyways, if he did, what would he even say? That his wife was just staring at him weird? I mean, it's kind of like it's not illegal to stare at people, you know? As bizarre as it was, there was no crimes that were being committed, no real danger, etc. It was just a prank. Oh, weird one, albeit. Ben knew in his heart, though, that this didn't seem like a simple prank. This seemed like something serious, and that something was very wrong with Lynn, and he thought to himself that Lynn was able to trick Becca into just thinking that she was, you know, sick and tired and just wanted Ben back. But he kind of knew better at this point. He didn't know what to do. So he called his mommy. He didn't want to, but he did anyways. He loved avoiding his old mommy, but he needed her help. And he didn't want to talk to her, but he had to speak to her because she knew Lynn better than he did. So Ben did what any lost and confused husband would do. Call your wife's mom. He really didn't want to. He did not want to at all, but he needed her help. He needed to call someone who knew Lynn better than he did. And the only person that he could think of was his mother-in-law. When Ben called Lynn's mother, he asked her if she knew of any strange or weird behavior that her daughter had partaken in the past, and she asked Ben if he was joking and that it wasn't really funny to ask that kind of thing, and he insisted that he wasn't joking. She said that if he was that concerned, he should seek professional help, and then she just hung up. That call, having gone nowhere, had Ben's head sort of spinning. He was trying to wrap his head around the whole situation. Why would Lynn's mom refused to help in any way? It seems weird. Why wouldn't you want to help your own daughter? But then he remembered the last words that she said, which was to seek professional help. And she had said those words with a bit of noticeable urgency. And Ben, being in the state that he was mentally, he could have just been grasping at straws, but he was sure that her voice had changed when she said that. I'm getting scared reading this. I want to be honest with you guys. I'm getting scared telling you this story. Ben then waited for Chris to get home, and him, Chris, and Rebecca just had a big conversation that eventually ended in them conceding that Lynn needed psychiatric help. He didn't tell them everything, but he did successfully convince them that something was strange and awry when it comes to Lynn's behavior. He told them specifically about the encounter in the bathroom with the closet, and they were very shocked, but they did end up believing him, thankfully. Throughout all this, they kept saying that Lynn had to just be playing some kind of strange joke or weird prank or something like that, and they didn't want to get the police involved. Instead, Chris just offered to go back to Ben's house with him to get Lynn help. Chris and Ben waited to the next morning to go back to where Lynn was. They obviously weren't going to go at night. They went. They got back there. Lynn's car wasn't there, but the front door was open, and things kind of seemed unusual. Upon walking up closer to the door, Ben could have sworn that he'd seen Lynn's eyes peeking through the gap for a split second, but he couldn't prove it at all. And he started shaking and beginning to sweat. Just immediately, fear coursed through his body. Chris, however, was fine because he had yet to experience this terrifying, thing. They pushed the door open and then were immediately hit in the face with a big wafting scent of just rot, shit, dookie, and just demon stink, sulfur, all right? Potbelly goblins been living in this house. They walked around the house with their noses scrunched up, just completely unnerved, because why would it smell like this? It makes no sense. On top of the rot, the house was completely quiet. Even at 10 o'clock in the morning, the curtains were closed up tight. There was no light let in the house. It was bizarre. They moved through the whole house, looking under the couches, in closets, looking in individual rooms. Chris at one point was confused as to why they were looking under the couch, because we're looking at you for your wife, dude. It's a woman. She's not gonna be under the couch. She's not two-dimensional. She's three-dimensional. So Chris was confused this whole time. He knew some of the story, but he didn't have the entire gravity of the situation locked into his brain like Ben did. And he kept looking at him like he was a moron. Chris did. They walked around the house and they went up the stairs. They found a few photos from their wedding that were just kind of smashed on the stairs. There was pieces of glass, and they walked up the steps, searched around the house, and went to the bathroom, which looked like nothing had changed since Ben's last encounter in there a few days before. Chris suggested to Ben that he go get some clothes so they can just, clean up a bit, go back to Chris's house, and then come back. I would have called the police at this point, but it gets way worse. They go into Ben's bedroom to get some clothes, and the stench just grew to an undeniable level of disgusting rot. Once they got in there, both their faces just drained of color, and they saw eyeballs soaking into the rug. Dozens of pairs of eyeballs, carefully laid out, some big, some small, some white, some brown. Very, very, very disturbing behavior from your average girl. Not very feminine, all right? Weird. Ben filled a duffel bag full of clothes, grabbed it, closed the closet, and then began to walk back out when Chris, at this point, started to feel like he was being watched, the same feeling that Ben had felt so many times before. They both turned around to see Lynn under the bed with her hands curled up beneath her chin, her eyes bulging, her smile insanely wide like a happy little kid on Christmas morning, all right? But under a bed surrounded by rotten eyeballs, and probably shit too. Some fecal matter is definitely in there for sure. So not anything like a kid on Christmas morning, I guess. She knew she'd been found, and Ben and Chris could then hear some strange hiccup-type noises that she was making. They were quiet, but you could definitely hear them coming from her throat, some weird hiccuping stuff. Like the excitement was just too much for her. She couldn't handle it. They both wanted to run, but Ben couldn't. He couldn't. This was the woman he married. He had to help her. He softly said her name, Lynn, and then her head rocked side to side as if she was acknowledging what he said. He said, I just want to help. Can you just let me help in some way? And he took a single step forward as if he was approaching some sort of dangerous animal. He said, I love you, Lynn. And he continued to approach her. Her eyes got bigger. Her shoulders started to quiver. And then he crouched down to get a better look at her, and he could see that her hands were covered in blood. He said, Lynn, are you hurt? What is going on? She bobbed her head. She confirmed that she was hurt. Her bloody fingers moving up and down as if she was, playing Piano Man by Billy Joel or some weird shit like that. And they just grazed her chin, leaving little tiny blood smears on her face. The smell coming from his wife was revolting. Her lips were dry and cracked. You could see blood coming from the cracks of her thin, weird little lips, her little whitey lips. I got little thin lips too, so it's okay, Lynn. Ben knew that she wouldn't come out on her own by her weird, erratic behavior, but he didn't want to leave her in this state. I would call the cops. He scooted closer to her, reached out, and noticed really truly that she was bleeding from a bunch of different places, and he couldn't do anything but instinctively try to help her even more. He reached out to take her hand. Before he could reach her, she sprang out, grabbed him, and a sharp pain shot through his arm. He fell back on his ass. He could feel blood dripping from his arm. He looked back at Lynn and could see her holding a large shard of glass that she just stabbed him in his arm with. Crazy bitch. At some point during this, when Ben grabbed his duffel, Chris walked out of the room, down the hallway a little bit, and he heard the commotion of him getting stabbed by the glass, Chris came back to ask what was going on, and Lynn directed her focus from Ben over to Chris. Ben noticed this, and he noticed that her gaze went from, kind of like an emphatic childlike gaze to hungry like an animal, monster, a lion. Before they could really do anything, and while Chris was just starting to realize the blood coming from Ben's arm, Lynn lurched out from underneath the bed with the shard of glass and tried to chase down Chris. Ben backed up, ran into Chris on his back, and they both just started to run. This whole time, Lynn's mouth hanging wide open, her hands bleeding from holding the glass.
Looking like a goddamn fucking crazy bitch, huh?
And the smile turned into a disgusting, monstrous snarl. Both Chris and Ben started to run down the hallway away from Lynn, who was clutching a piece of glass, trying to stab at them. They ran, barely able to escape. They could hear her hiccuping directly behind him. They both made it to the front door before Ben could feel Lynn basically jump down the steps onto his back and just stab him right in his shoulder. Then Ben shook her off himself, opened the door, ran out to the car. They bolted. They looked in the rearview mirror, fully expecting to see her chasing behind them the entire time, but alas, she did not. They went to the ER, got stitches, and then finally called the police. They went back to the house, asked a bunch of questions, but Lynn was not there, which is not good, because she's really good at hiding, and that's fucking scary. They try to sort stuff out with the police. Ben drops off Chris at his house, and then Ben travels an additional hour away on top of the 40 minutes, stays at a motel just to try to put as much distance between him and his insane bitch whore wife. So there was Ben at this motel, waiting to hear from the police to see if they were to find her or just get any sort of positive news so he could finally breathe and let himself relax. Suddenly, his phone vibrated. He got a text from an unknown number, and it said simply, "I've found you." And there was a picture attached. It was dark and grainy, and it was of that black guy that everyone was sending around at COVID when the guy with the big dick. No, just kidding. It was of Lynn, and she found him, and then he died. I sawed into my pants in this story, guys. Hopefully you all enjoyed it.